Welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. I know we have the competition of some beautiful weather, so really appreciate everybody. My name is Felice Cleveland. I am the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Contemporary Arts Museum, Houston. Welcome to today's panel discussion as we launch UN Interfaith Harmony Week in Houston, and an extra special thank you to our partners at the American Leadership Forum in supporting and partnering with us on this event. This is just the first event in a full week of programming. We have these pamphlets, flyers at the front desk that list out everything going on throughout the city this week, and would encourage you to check that out and visit our partner organizations. Before we begin, I want to invite you to a few upcoming events here at CAM. Next Saturday, February 8th, we invite you to our Black History Month celebration, the 4th annual Woodson Black Fest at CAM. This year, we will feature a tour of this exhibition, spoken word performances, poetry, and music by Black and Afro-Latino artists. On Wednesday, February 12th, at the Johnson Neighborhood Library, we'll be celebrating the opening of an exhibition called Through Our Eyes, The Art of Family, Friendship, and Pastime. This exhibition will feature student artwork from South Early College high school students that were made under the mentorship of artist Carlos Mendoza as part of CAM's Teaching Artists in Classroom project. We have ongoing hands-on art-making programming most weekends and a full schedule of events throughout the run of this exhibition. We ask that you make sure to follow CAM on social media and sign up for our e-newsletter and check our calendar for all of our upcoming events. CAM is committed to showcasing groundbreaking contemporary art, contributing to Houston's artistic landscape, as well as offering free, accessible programs and tours. These efforts would not be possible without enthusiasts like you who strengthen your impact with contributions which help us uphold our commitment to our community. If you'd like to support us, we encourage you to make a donation. You can see my friend Quincy at the front desk, or any one of us at the museum to help you make a donation online. And I will also say there's an incredible catalog that accompanies this exhibition, which is also available for purchase at the front desk. Before we welcome the panelists and begin the discussion, we are honored to have artist Vincent Valdez with us to welcome you and share more about the work that inspired this discussion, Dream Baby Dream. Welcome, Vincent.
It's good to see all your faces. Thank you to each of you speakers today for not only sharing your insights and wisdom with us, but for choosing to use this work as a backdrop. I don't want to say too much, but I thought I'd share with you a few words that I randomly came across around 2016-17 that in many ways helped to spark the idea, the concept, the intention of these images behind us. I was in a used bookstore, which I do pretty often, and I randomly came across this book because of its cover image. For me, it's all about that cover image. It seemed interesting, sort of a faded American flag, and the title was The Image by Daniel Boorstin, written in 1962. A prophetic sensibility about what he saw as a messenger, as an observer, an examiner, about the fate that America was heading towards. In many ways, his words ring more true today in 21st century America than they did in 1962. Let me see if I can read my own handwriting here. The image. The making of illusions which flood our experience has become the business of America. Some of its most honest and most necessary and most respectable business. I am thinking not only of advertising and public relations and political rhetoric, but of all the activities which purport to inform and comfort and improve and educate and elevate us. The work of our best journalists, our most enterprising book publishers, our most energetic manufacturers and merchandisers, our most successful entertainers, our best guides to world travel, and our most influential leaders in foreign relations. Our every effort to satisfy our extravagant expectations simply makes them more extravagant and makes our illusions more attractive. The story of the making of our illusions, the news behind the news, has become the most appealing news of the world. We tyrannize and frustrate ourselves by expecting more than the world can give us, or than we can make of the world. We demand that everyone who talks to us, or writes for us, or takes pictures of us, or makes merchandise for us, should live in our world of extravagant expectations. We expect this event of the people, we expect this even of the peoples of foreign countries. We have become so accustomed to our illusions that we mistake them for reality. We demand them, and we demand that there be always more of them, bigger and better and more vivid. They are the world of our making, the world of the image. Nowadays, everybody tells us that what we need is more belief, a stronger and deeper and more encompassing faith, a faith in America and in what we are doing. That may be true in the long run. What we need first and now is to disillusion ourselves. What ails us most is not what we have done with America, but what we have substituted for America. We suffer primarily not from our vices or from our weaknesses, but from our illusions. We are haunted not by reality, but the images we have put in place of reality. To discover our illusions will not solve the problems of our world, but if we do not discover them, we will never discover our real problems. To dispel the ghosts which populate the world of our making will not give us the power to conquer the real enemies of the real world or to remake the real world. But it may help us discover that we cannot make the world in our image. It will liberate us and sharpen our vision. It will clear away the fog so we can face the world we share with all of mankind. Daniel Boorstin, The Image, 1962. I'm going to leave it at that and let you guys take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Now I'd like to introduce Oni Blair, the Executive Director at the ACLU of Texas and the moderator for our discussion today. Hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and if you're in the museum and curious about what's going on, you are always welcome to have a seat for this conversation that we're starting out on UN World Interfaith Harmony Week. And I am pleased to be here with this amazing panel of people from our community talking about what this week means and the work that they do around the city. Before we get started though, I just want to say from a personal reflection, it is really a great honor to be with you here, Vincent, and thank you for bringing this here and the outstanding work that the Contemporary Arts Museum of Houston is doing. I brought my family here and have worked with my team, some of my colleagues here from the ACLU of Texas, and I have a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And to walk through this and to hear them ask questions from their perspective and explain, you know, Mommy, is that from a long time ago as we went through Dream Baby Dream and then headed over it to your left? And I asked them, well, what do you see in the picture? And they said, well, Mommy, that looks like a car from today and a cell tower from today. But what they're doing looks like things that happened a long time ago. And having to explain to them what is happening in America today that they know, and also you try to shield from your children as much as you can for as long as you can. But having very real conversations, explaining to them the crosses that they see and the images of religion, of people, of hatred, of destruction, of age and generations, but also looking for images of hope, not in just one piece, but through the whole exhibit. And so I am pleased to be here to be able to have this conversation about what it means for interfaith harmony, no longer using the word of tolerance, and sitting with people who have used their experiences as educators, religious leaders, volunteers, experts, psychotherapists, leaders of great institutions to be able to have this conversation. So first I'd start with my introduction of Sean Fitzpatrick, who leads the Jung Center and is a psychotherapist by training, a PhD, and also has a background in religious studies. Sean, welcome.
Thank you so much.
And Rabbi Shaul, who has worked in a number of places leading social justice and centering around the rights and interests of the Jewish people. You've worked everywhere from AIDS campaigns to working with people in human rights in Russia. Thank you for being here, and you have a special connection to Bringing This Week, which we'll get to.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Rayanne Darensbourg. Rayanne, welcome, and thank you for all your leadership at the Children's Museum of Houston. Rayanne has worked in education and government and in other places, nonprofits. Thank you, Rayanne.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And Reverend Gregory Han. Reverend Han is currently a PhD student working on religious studies at Rice and has for many years led interfaith education, including at Interfaith Ministries. Welcome, Reverend Han.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Great. Well, I'd like to start with Rabbi Shaul. Rabbi Shaul, you've been instrumental in bringing UN World Interfaith Harmony Week to Houston. I would love to hear some of the history about how you brought it here, how the week evolved, how we came here to the CAM, and what's your personal connection to this?
Well, thank you. I'd like to, if I may, begin on a personal note because this backdrop is pretty powerful and personally resonates with some of my own history. I'd like to honor and pay tribute to Rabbi Michael Lerner, who's there. And Rabbi Lerner was he passed away this past August, blessed memory. He was a very progressive individual who founded the renewal movement within Judaism, which was an attempt to bring Judaism and its values and its history of social justice to bear on the issues of today, and both in the liturgical religious sense, but also in the ethical and moral realms as well, and political realms. So I'm going to honor him by, as they say, what is it? Life imitates art, art imitates life. So I'm going to imitate, if I may, as a tribute to him. Thank you. So first of all, I'm going to, as you notice, he's wearing a head covering, which is traditional for Jews to do. I'm going to change out mine, which, by the way, is a Guatemalan, produced by Guatemalan women in a very small town. It's a social justice project to help raise the standard of living by having them crochet these. Okay, back to. So this is a kind of a Sephardic kippah head covering. Oops. So I'm going to wear that, and then I'm going to don the prayer shawl, which he's wearing as well. So this is a shawl that's worn during times of prayer and gathering. It fulfills the biblical commandment, you can look it up in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9, of wearing the fringes on the corners of our garments. So this is the fringe, and the significance of this is that it has it has 5 knots and 13 twists, 8 twists, I'm sorry, that comes to 13. And the word tzitzit in Hebrew has a numerical value of 600. If you add it all together, you get 613, which is the number of commandments in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. So I'm going to put this on in his honor. So there's a blessing that's recited, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, lehitatef b'tzitzit. And it means we thank our Creator for the ability to sanctify our lives through the donning of the talit. Good. Now, one of the things that this experience does for the person who dons it is it creates sacred space. And each individual who does that has their own little miniature temple, if you will, that they've created and they pray in. And this is some of the comments that I'd like to make in a moment. What art does and what religion does is it helps us to hold in tension particularity and universality. So even though I have my sacred space that I've created, I'm amongst people, and in the synagogue, other people would be wearing a talit as well. So we have a community of people who are sharing the same striving and same aspirations. Having said that, Rabbi Michael, the UN World Interfaith Harmony Week began in 2010. It was an initiative from the King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, who proposed setting aside a week, February 1st through the 7th, annually, to promote interfaith harmony. His contention was that there are so many organizations throughout the world that are doing wonderful, important work, interfaith and social justice and so forth, but the events themselves have an impact, but they don't necessarily garner a lot of attention. And so by focusing 1 week on this theme across the world, the attempt was to highlight the work of various organizations and efforts to promote interfaith harmony. So this has been taking place since 2010. I was fortunate and privileged to be in Calgary in 2017, and I was leading the Calgary Interfaith Council. We conducted our first program, as I'm doing with all of you today. It turned out, to our shock, we won first prize internationally. So my wife and I, an imam and his wife and a Christian minister, were flown to Amman, Jordan, to meet the king and accept the gold medal for first prize. So this is a very special event for me personally, but I know the impact that it can have on the community by bringing together diverse partners, as we've done. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 organizations participating throughout the week in various activities. I hope you will take a look at the flyer. And so it's a very significant opportunity for us here in Houston. And Houston, to me, is perhaps a prime location to hold this, because the nature of our city is that it's a very diverse city. As Stephen Kleinberg has said, the rest of the country is going to look like us by 2050. So we're already, in a sense, there, but we need to continue to have these opportunities for people to come together, continue to work together to build bridges, to build a knowledge base, to increase our religious literacy about each other, to work together and promote the common good. And this week, hopefully, we'll launch that, and will be plant the seed for an annual event every year here in Houston. So I'm very thrilled about doing that. I will come back to the point about particularity and universality. And I think one of the benefits of sitting here and being stimulated by artwork is that it helps us to do what the theme of this painting is, which is dream, baby, dream. And that's such an important notion. Woven into the theme for this week of activity, which is walking, talking, and working together, dream, baby, dream is an essential component of it. We can't lose the capacity to dream, to aspire, to live in a world that we think is worthy of our humanity, a world that relieves suffering, that promotes compassion and justice, that speaks to the highest that we can be. So I'm thrilled to be able to participate this and help launch this week. And again, I encourage you to take a look at the flyer and come and join us. Even if you haven't RSVP'd, just show up for the events. You'll be fine. You'll be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Shaul. Sean, I know that you were deeply involved in bringing this exhibit and advising the museum on the work here. And one thing that I'm struck by is this piece, Dream Baby Dream, has no people talking in it, but it sparks this difficult conversation like the ones that we're having now around faith. This is part of your everyday work at the Jung Center. How do you bring people into difficult conversations, whether it's politics or race or faith? How do you do that through art? And how do you bring in your background as a psychotherapist into that as well?
So, thank you. And I just want to say I don't know if Vincent might have stepped away, but just how meaningful it is to think about these questions in this space, because his work insists that we look at what is difficult. And, I come to it a bit from, as you said, like a perspective of a psychotherapist. That, what is real is what we need to be talking about. When often in the work of healing, what we have to do is disillusion ourselves, which is, to bring back Daniel Boorstin, we have to do the work of looking at what we've hidden from ourselves and what others have hidden from us structurally. But that is hard work and work that is easy to avoid, right? If I am not directly affected, if I happen to be in a place of, we use the language of privilege now, so if this isn't a situation where I am experiencing oppression or lack or discrimination or so on, it's very easy for me to not engage in the conversation. So to draw people in to have a conversation about what is difficult has to involve a couple of things that we would do if we were working with trauma, and I might talk about that a little bit later in more detail, but if we were working with trauma in a clinical context, we're after two basic things. The first work is learning how to experience and regulate ourselves when we're overwhelmed, okay? Particularly if there are stories that have not been told, or we have been, have been hidden from us. I'll say personally, the being able to be on the program advisory committee for this show was personally transformative. In some ways, embarrassing, and I want to talk about why that is, and ultimately freeing. Let me talk about the embarrassment. Joe Campos Torres. I've lived in Houston since 91, so 34 years. Never heard the story. I've imagined myself to be progressive and paying attention, and have never heard the story. And as we congregated to talk about it as a program advisory group, I felt shame that I didn't know this story, and I should. And also, what resonated for me about it was that this is how trauma works, and this is how illusions are created. And it happens on a very human level. When something overwhelming happens to us or happens within a family system, in order to manage it, we often will dissociate, okay? And dissociation is stepping away from what's real. Now that can be really adaptive and important in order for you to be able to survive, but that work has to be undone. And in order to undo it, we have to develop the tolerance to feel what we haven't been feeling. And that's true on a collective level. I think in the city of Houston, the reason that the story of Joe Campos Torres, which if you go downstairs, if you haven't visited the show yet, you go downstairs and you'll see Vincent's just eloquent work commemorating Joe, that we have to, as a community, we have not wanted to look at that because it's painful to look at it. It's very hard to keep in our memory that the police, this organ of order and communal safety, were inflicting exactly the opposite of that against a community that was not white. The only reason, it was very clearly a racist hate crime against Joe Campos Torres. And we don't want to talk about that, and we don't want to keep it in our awareness because it can be overwhelming. In the work of having conversations, we have to prepare ourselves to feel things that we do not want to feel. We have to prepare ourselves to see things about ourselves, the communities we care about, the narratives that are important to us, the values that we've been carrying, and understand that our intentions may have little to do with the impact that they have in the world. So it is difficult. And it takes moral courage. It takes a kind of moral courage to step into that space. But what's possible out of it is great freedom. When we're able to talk about it, and this comes back around to the notion of healing trauma, when we're able to talk about it, when we're able to affirm that what happened, then we can move to restoration, right? Whether that for an individual is restoring a part of ourselves that has been cut off, or in the context of a community, restoring a relationship that has been profoundly damaged between communities. It's difficult work, but I think the starting place is, how do I manage what I'm feeling? How do I accept things that are hard to feel? And the best way to do that is actually in community. It's actually among people who have good intentions and also the willingness to sit in what is difficult and hard to look at. And there is release and relief on the other side of that.
Thank you, Sean. That's really helpful, giving perspective, and especially as we relate it specifically to faith. Sean, I want to come to you on this question. As the leader of a center, if you're not familiar, the Jung Center is next door. But how is art able to help us maintain those memories? And why is that important with, sorry, my paper's falling. Why is that important with faith, and how do you do that with faith?
Yeah. Boy, it feels like the subject of a doctoral dissertation.
Give me your best proposal today.
Let me think with Vincent a little bit, and what's moving to me about this show. So the Jung Center, just very briefly, we're very interested in the intersection of creativity and mental health, and one of the ways that we, where we sort of place our feet is on the power of art to express the inexpressible, right? And from a perspective of trauma, and I don't want to limit the way we talk about this work psychologically in trauma language, but from the perspective of trauma, often what is the experience exceeds language. The experience exceeds our ability to express it. There's a quick acronym that as a therapist we use for people who are dealing with self-harming behavior, and it's CARESS. It stands for communicate alternatively, release endorphins, and self-soothe. Okay? Communicating alternatively often in practice looks like, don't talk about it, draw it, right? Sing it, dance it, allow what doesn't easily fit into our containers of language to move through you and be expressed. So that, I think, is the power of art in terms of being able to allow what has been in individual memory and collective memory to emerge into our awareness and to reflect not just what is past, but what is present. I think in relation to faith, well, let me just say this. Let me say this about Vincent's work. So I project my own, I'm not an observant Roman Catholic, but I was raised Catholic, and the Catholic iconography that is everywhere in this show is very much alive in me, and I'm sensitive to as I look at it. And what Vincent does, I think, is he allows the language of faith to show us multiple things at once. How an image like, we could pick one of many. You might, if you go through the show, pay attention to the praying hands that show up again and again and again. And there's a I don't know the name of it, but it's a larger than life portrait of the boxer in the corner that's a wall, on the other side of the room, that just greets you like this. If you look at the boxer's wearing a tattoo, and it's a tattoo of praying hands. And beneath it, Vincent has written el espíritu de resistencia. Okay, so the image of praying hands, which means the spirit of resistance. Okay, so prayer in this sense is a way not just of seeking God's intervention or guidance or safety, or as sometimes is critiqued, it's not just seeking a release from this earthly suffering into a heaven beyond. It's actually an action. It's a request for working in this world, for the strength to change what's happening in this world now. It's incredibly empowering, and so these images do not have to express one reality. They can express multiple realities. And I'll just say one more thing, which is that I feel strongly in this show that the Christian iconography is expressing a fundamental truth of the Jesus narrative, which is that it's about an oppressed minority, a brown person who is it was sacrificed ultimately at the hands of an imperial power, of an oppressing power, and in that use of the imagery, it is bringing the memory of Christian history into the present as a vehicle for not just a kind of saving motion, but one of moving and acting in the world that I just am really moved by.
It's a really great point about oppressor and the oppressed that we see. And also, and I want to come to you, Rabbi Shaul, on the responsibility that, or maybe the responsibility that's imposed on artists to be able to share that perspective of the oppressor and the oppressed, or even challenging those notions. Is that a responsibility of artists? And likewise, in your role as a faith leader, is that the responsibility of faith leaders, especially during a week like this, to be able to challenge those histories and notions as we think about dominance and who is dominated?
My general response would be, yes, it's the responsibility of everyone, regardless of whether you're an artist or religious.
I just want to put it on the artists and faith leaders today.
So that's my way of skirting the artist part of the... But I can speak about religious leaders.
Please.
And I'm going to...
You seem to have some expertise in that role, so go for it.
I don't know. I've had experience. I don't know about expertise. There's a difference. I did, and pardon me for doing it this way, and not speaking to you, but I'm going to read what I wrote because I spent some time thinking about this question and about the political aspects of it. And I really want to share my thoughts as I articulated them, and I think I'd probably lose some of it if I just ramble. Okay, so I wrote the following thought here. The responsible and moral exercise of power has by and large eluded civilization from the dawn of time. The ancient empires, as well as those that extended through the Middle Ages, employed the use of force to control and manipulate populations more often than they governed through moral or religious consensus. The result has been periods of significant achievement in all fields of human endeavor, including art, attenuated by horrific abuse and oppression. As a Jew, I can attest to the history of powerlessness. From the destruction of the temple, Second Temple in 70 CE, the Common Era, Jews lost sovereignty in their land while the majority of the Jewish people were dispersed among the nations of the world. And this happened for nearly 2,000 years until the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. As such, during that period of time, we were subjected to religious, economic, legal, and social discrimination and persecution, which resulted in frequent Jewish migration through Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and elsewhere. So as a Jew, I also know the responsibility and the joy of power that has been manifest in the creation of the State of Israel. So that topic Israel and the use of power is something that I'll ask that we talk about at another point in time. But it is an important subject. After being powerlessness for 2,000 years and suddenly having power, how do you exercise power in a just and moral way? Now, I do want to admonish anyone who's sort of thinking about this at the moment that we shouldn't be self-righteous. And that is to say, we shouldn't be quick to condemn or criticize without doing so regarding our own shortcomings. I don't think any nation, any people are going to find themselves blameless in the equation of power and the exercise of power in both just and abusive circumstances. That thought leads me to comment on the role of religious leaders. So, as a religious leader, I've always lived in a tension between the role that I play as an institutional leader, preserving, furthering, protecting the trappings of the particular religion, wielding authority within the religious community and communally, and balancing that with the biblical role as an advocate for moral truth. The tradition of the prophets in particular speaks quite loudly within the Jewish tradition, and it was one that mandated holding leaders accountable for their actions in either enhancing or diminishing the well-being of the people. And one of the strong teachings and clear emphasis in the Torah is that there is only one law, and it applies to everyone. No one, as you've heard that cliche, is above the law. Unfortunately, many, if not most, religious leaders are, like their political counterparts, more interested in preserving their positions and status than speaking out about injustice. And that's my critique of my peers and colleagues, whether they're rabbis, priests, imams, so forth. Just recently we saw the bishop in Washington speaking truth to power to the President of the United States. And I believe she deserves praise for her willingness to remind the President that justice that is not tempered by mercy leads to human suffering. And that was an important message, an important role that she played. We can see that as being courageous, but I see that really as a fundamental function of what she should be doing as a religious leader. So religious leaders, on the contrary, who speak about superiority, about their way as the only and the right way, they tend to foster prejudice towards others. They kind of denigrate and delegitimize others. And to them, I say their positions, their views, their conduct deserves scrutiny, challenge, and sometimes disavowal. Lest I presume that I'm speaking about any specific religious leaders, please know that every religious tradition in our country has extremists. We have people within our traditions whose message is one that undermines the fabric of life which we cherish and aspire to. So I became a rabbi, and the word rabbi really means teacher, because I deeply believe that the moral and ethical values that I held could be a force for the relief of human suffering and the creation of positive change that could bring us closer to a messianic age, an age characterized by the absence of disease, hunger, poverty, conflict, and violence. So, from my perspective, one of the primary roles of clergy from all divergent traditions correlates to the theme of this week, which is walking, talking, and working together. And I hope that what we're able to do through our various types of programs this week will allow us to walk stronger, to talk with more conviction, also to listen with more conviction, and to work together so that we really do make some much needed changes and bring some unity to this community that's so divided and fractured in many ways. So that's my my hope and prayer for us going forward today and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't give me that look, Rayanne. Because before we close out, I do want to go to you and to you, Reverend Han. But Rabbi Shaul touched on something that you had talked about earlier, Rayanne. So I want to give you an opportunity just to expound on it. And underscoring his comments is this aspect of identity, and identity and faith are inextricable, whether you're talking about the identity of a community or the identity of an individual. And it sounds like part of the exhibit that you're working on presents an opportunity to talk about both. So how do we explore identity and faith? How do we give ourselves space to do that in a way that also honors somebody else's identity without erasing it?
I'll try my best there. I don't know if my mic is on or not, but you know, I think part of it is, as a community, we have to provide a platform to express we have unique experiences and unique challenges, and not just us, but children do as well. And if we can early on create the platforms for those expressions, when I hear Sean talk about trauma, when I hear Rabbi here just speak about the ability to, what I hear you say is be beyond self, those are things that we have to teach. Those are not things that just happen. So we have to have some great intentionality of doing that in a way that surfaces a self-discovery, personal growth path. And I feel a huge responsibility in this community to do that early on. If we do that early on, we then set the stage for this room to be filled. There's no reason why this space should not be filled. But you have to start that, you have to start surfacing that early in order for it to be highly valued. And part of that is having a really, what we attempt to do early on is for children to be really grounded in self. How can we support that? And then really grounded in having an appreciation and being curious enough to explore and ask questions and open up and listen and learn. Those are all taught and then reinforced by us.
So I want to press you just a little bit. How do you do that? Because, you know, a child who's been at school all week long through a million tests every single week doesn't want to hear more words. So what tools are you using to be able to relate to a child? And I say a child because it's easier for us to focus on a child. Like it's the kid can do it, then I can do it, but I'd rather focus on the kid. So
yeah. So, you know, it has taken us about 2 years through a lot of prototyping to figure out how to do that. So we actually started with a kids committee, and we started asking them questions of how, bring us into your homes and just talk to us, show us and express to us. And then we started working through what are some of the ways that children would want to express themselves. And one example I'd give you in the exhibit is around food. You know, we also have to be developmentally appropriate, and then we can scaffold up. Families can scaffold up, but you have to have a starting place to begin, and that's what we can do. And then we're going to count on everyone else to keep scaffolding up from there. But at the table, there's a way for children to come and sit together, and then they can share through different foods what it is that, how do I celebrate traditions in my family, and then with those alongside them, well, how do you celebrate traditions in your family? And we had a huge learning curve for us as a museum community. We have a foundation in science and STEM. We did not have the foundation that we needed to really begin having this conversation. So our intentionality was that, one, we didn't have the answers, but we had a lot of questions. And we used some of that same methodology to make sure we engaged with over 50 families, 50 children, lots of advisors, lots of questions asked. But then ultimately what we came around to is that we had to do some really deep professional learning ourselves and engage in hiring faith educators who can help lift up some of the questions that children have. We won't have all the answers, but what we'll do is we'll be able to help children explore deeper through some intentional resource room building. So you can be in an exhibit, but then you can then pull back. You can take home resources that can help you extend that conversation, whether it's in stories, in books, in performances that we've brought in. We have a huge digital display on Houston Kids, where kids are going to use a multitude of words and art to express who they are and be able to take that home with them, but also keep it in the museum. And over the next 2 years in space, we'll be able to build and build and build, where children can then come back, see how they're like, see who their friends are, and who are they curious enough to have conversations with in our gallery.
Thank you, Rayanne. I'm excited. Tell for everyone, when does the exhibit open?
A soft opening at the end of this month, and then we open to the public in March, and we'll be in space for 2 years before we go to our sister museum in Fort Bend for another 1.5 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Reverend Han, I want to go to you to help close us out in this space where we're sharing and so privileged to be a part, sitting among this exhibit and talking about interfaith. Help us think about how we can unite the two as we're exploring faith, and really, what is the role of art as we explore faith and our civil liberties and civil rights? Because connected to all of this is, you have the right to practice your faith and I have the right to practice my faith. How do we coexist in this and share this space together?
So I said that this was my second favorite room. I think my favorite room is downstairs. It is downstairs, and it's the archives. So I would implore you not to leave the museum today without going downstairs and to look at the archives. There's a reason. I think what you can see there is how the artist was both being shaped by what he was seeing and then expressing, but also, and then also the practice of shaping his practices, which for an artist I would assert is the act of how one is in the world. These murals that you see up here didn't just magically appear. They were the product of an artist, I would claim, who put in the work of shaping and being shaped. About a year ago, I gave a paper at a graduate student conference focusing on the work of the French philosopher and historian of ideas, Michel Foucault. Later in his career and in his life, beyond his knowledge stage and his power stage, and in a moment of his life when he was working on ethics, and not ethics in the sense of a utilitarian, let's do what's good for everybody, or do the deontological, do what could be made into a universal maxim, but ethics as a way of life, very similar to an artist, of self-formation. He talked about the aesthetics of existence and looked back at the ways that early Christian Greeks and Romans wanted to fashion their lives. So I would say art is a way of life and faith is a way of life. The great faith artists that I would look at, Dorothy Day, Simone Weil, MLK, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, were not unlike what I would see in an artist. The self-creative capacities of art are not relegated to people who can paint or draw, but these practices and techniques of self-fashioning that are part of what are called the arts of living. And let me close my comments with a quote by a scholar named Sylvia Wynter, and she says this: "Human beings are magical, bios and logos, words made flesh, muscle and bone animated by hope and desire, belief materialized in deeds, deeds which crystallize our actualities. And the maps of spring always have to be redrawn again in undared forms. I think that is the activity both of an artist and also people, just to use the trite term, people of faith.
It's a beautiful way to end today. Thank you, Reverend Han. Thank you, Rayanne. Thank you, Rabbi Shaul. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for all of you for being here, and the Cam, Felice, and Yet in particular, and everyone who had a part in this. If you haven't had a chance to explore the exhibit, please do. And be sure to check out all of the written materials, and our guests will be here to answer more questions. Again, my name is Oni Blair, and I'm with the ACLU of Texas. Thanks so much.